Stuart Swinson.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm delighted to follow the Right Honourable Member for Leicester West, who has been a frequent attender of these debates so far and very well outlined the bigger picture in relation to what we are discussing here today and the successes of the European Union over the last 60 years or so. Mr Deputy Speaker, I am pro-European, but the European Union is certainly not without its faults. For too long, power has been concentrated. I would like to make just a little progress, and then I'm sure I will not want to miss out on an intervention from the honourable gentleman. For too long, power has been concentrated in those who are appointed, not elected. And the structures of the EU have often proved cumbersome, to say the least, at times even making this House look modern and streamlined by comparison. No easy task. I welcome, therefore, the opportunity to discuss the proposed changes to the institutions of the EU contained within the Lisbon Treaty. I was also pleased to be here for, I think, what will surely be, just in one or 2 minutes, I certainly will. I was also pleased to be here for what surely must be a first in one of these debates, and I refer to, of course, that elusive thing which is finding a bit of the treaty that the Conservatives actually agree with, as regards the Council of Ministers team presidencies and there being fewer commissioners. In 1 second. It's just a shame my honourable friend from Kingston and Surbiton was not here to hear this, because he might think I'm joking when I tell him later. But at least I'll be able to prove it to him in Hansard. I will now give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful to the honourable lady. On the subject of agreeing with colleagues, is she able to tell the House whether she agrees with her right honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Hallam, that the Speaker's decision not to select the amendment for debate was an outrage?
Well, I certainly find it incredibly disappointing that we're not able to debate the amendment which stands in the name of my right honourable friend, member for Sheffield Hallam. We feel very passionately about this, as is evident, but I must return to the subject of the debate of the amendment, sadly, which has been selected. I will give way to the honourable lady.
Deeply grateful. Given that the Liberal Democrats were not able to have their motion debated, does that mean they will then vote with the other motion, which asks for a two-question referendum?
I have to disappoint the honourable lady. I am sorry to do so, obviously. Fortunately, we have had at least one occasion on which to test the House on this matter, and it's just a shame that so many honourable members, particularly those who actually would like to see us leave the EU, decided not to vote for a referendum that would enable us to do that, and no doubt disappointing many of their constituents. On the issue of the European Council, the current 6 month, I will give way shortly. I've given way a little bit. I'll make some progress. The current 6-month rotating presidency is clearly not a sensible system for the European Council. It means that the body lacks direction and consistency. Like many members, I was pleased to see the focus that the UK government put on the Make Poverty History campaign during the last UK presidency of the European Council. And while some progress was indeed made on this issue, I believe much more could have been and should have been achieved on this front. A longer presidency with proper time to set an agenda and follow through on issues is therefore a good idea. In the context of the extension of the time period for this role, we were all very entertained at second reading, and then a little again today, by the Right Honourable Member for Richmond's imagery of a Supreme President Blair. Perish the thought. But while he does paint a very memorable picture, away from Fantasyland, the reality is that the President of the European Council proposed in this treaty does not gain additional powers, and the role will remain the same as it is currently, just with a slightly less frantic turnover of occupants. There are some genuine concerns about the interplay between the President of the European Council, the President of the Commission and the new expanded High Representative role, and how these will indeed interact with each other. I understand these, and I would like to hear more from the Minister about how those rules will be clearly defined and indeed made to be complementary to one another rather than in constant conflict. Turning to the issue of the Council of Ministers, the moves to qualified majority voting in this are arguably less significant than in the Maastricht Treaty. 16 of them, as we have heard, will either not apply to the UK or are areas for which we have negotiated opt-ins. 14 are purely procedural, and the rest are clearly in the UK national interest. We've already heard in some of the debates on this issue about the British entrepreneurs that will be helped by facilitating self-employment in other member states, the British businesses that will benefit from better coordination of intellectual property rights, the advantages in making EU humanitarian aid operations more streamlined, and the energy liberalisation aspects. And in these cases, the move to qualified majority voting helps the UK by reducing the likelihood of such welcome measures being blocked by states perhaps less enlightened and committed to market liberalisation. As we've also heard, I think, from the Honourable Member for Preston, the changes to the way that QMV is calculated in the Council are also in the national interest because the power of the vote of the UK will go up from 8% to 12%. And given the general dislike on the Tory benches of anything being decided in Brussels, even clearly transnational issues such as climate change or cross-border crime, I do wonder why they don't welcome this stronger voice for the UK in these discussions. On the European Commission, there's the old...
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she's making a valiant performance in the course of her somewhat lonely vigil on her side. With her reference to the cross-border crime, can we take it then that it's the Liberal Party policy to opt into the Justice and Home Affairs provisions?
Well, it's certainly we do want to make sure that cross-border crime is dealt with swiftly, and we need to make sure that in measures relating to that, the UK must clearly examine any of these proposals coming forward and decide them on their merits. It's as simple as that. But equally, to take the opposite view and to say that there is never any point in coordinating with our international colleagues, frankly, could put us into a situation where we weren't able to tackle drug trafficking, people trafficking, and these horrendous crimes which, frankly, do need to be tackled. On the European Commission, there is an old maxim which I'm sure members will be familiar with, that a camel is a horse designed by committee. And those of us in this House with experiences in politics, I'm sure, will know that this can be true, and that the larger the committee, the unwieldier it becomes. With 27 member states, the Commission faced that very problem, and it is eminently sensible to move to reduce the size of the Commission, and indeed even the Conservatives have agreed that this is a welcome move. As this morning I attended a debate also which several other members were involved in about the Western Balkans, and many people said that it would be welcome to see other Balkan states accessing to the EU. This is clearly just going to become an issue that gets more important as EU number of member states increases. I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
The Honourable Lady seems to be an erstwhile expert on the Conservative Party's policy on Europe. Does she agree or disagree, a straight answer is what I require, with the position taken by her honourable friends, the members for Portsmouth South, Somerton and Frome and North Devon, who have implored their constituents and their own party to vote for a referendum which was agreed in the Honourable Lady's manifesto in 2005. Are they right or are they wrong?
Well, I certainly think that in some cases he's putting words into the mouths of my honourable friends, but I certainly do not agree with the position if that is as they have outlined in some cases, and I make no apologies for that. On the issue of the European Parliament, one of the biggest criticisms of the European Union has been the balance of power being weighted in favour of those parts of it which are appointed instead of directly elected, such as the Commission and the Council of Ministers. Therefore, more co-decision between the Parliament and the Council is welcome, and also the stronger role that Parliament will have in appointing the President of the Commission. Areas like the CFP, which we have heard about from the Scottish Nationalist members today, and the CAP, we would like to see major reform of these, and they will benefit from additional parliamentary scrutiny which will result. It's really not very easy for the European Parliament to be seen as being close to voters, particularly with MEPs covering such large constituencies. Indeed, I certainly don't envy my colleagues who are MEPs in Scotland, and their constituency is the entirety of Scotland. I find as a member of this House it is a challenge enough to make sure I represent 65,000 electors. But at the same time, the European Parliament is closer. The European Parliament is closer to voters than the alternatives, which are unelected and therefore less accountable. And so it is welcome to see these moves. And that's why I also welcome the idea of the Citizens' Initiative, enabling 1 million people to petition the Commission to take action on a specific issue. Now, time will tell how much this is used. I will give way to
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady. Given that she's so very keen on citizens' initiatives, doesn't she think it would be an initiative to give citizens in her own constituency a referendum on this treaty, as she promised?
We are actually, in fact, we did have the issue, which I'm sure other people may not have been asleep in the chamber today when it happened, that in fact the Liberal Democrats would like to have a referendum on the major issue of in and out of Europe. It's on the issue of in or out of Europe. But what I would also say to the Honourable Gentleman is I have had a total of 9 representations from my constituents constituents on this issue, which some honourable members shout out as many as that. It's clearly not the top issue in my mailbag. I do indeed consult with my constituents on a wide range of issues, and I welcome very much the House doing so, with lots of new modernisation procedures that are trialled, such as more e-democracy, petitioning, and indeed the excellent work of the Education Unit. But this Citizens' Initiative, I have been very generous, and I will give way to the gentleman who was on a trip, a select committee trip with me, and that's the only one.
I'm extremely grateful to the honourable lady, who is, as ever, most gracious. Could I... Thanks, Minister. Could I ask the honourable lady, she has explained why she feels there should be a referendum and her constituents should be given the opportunity to vote on in or out of Europe. And she's explained why she thinks that is, in her party's view, the substantive question. What she hasn't explained is, given the fact that that has not found support in this House, why she nonetheless wants to remove the right of her constituents to vote on this treaty in a referendum, the policy of her party and on which she stood when she was elected to this House. Could she please explain why that exception is something which she supports?
Order. There is a limited amount of time for this debate, and I suspect that the honourable lady is being sidetracked into issues which are not strictly relevant to what the motion that is before the House. So I would hope that the honourable lady will not be tempted too much by the honourable gentleman.
I will certainly try and resist that temptation. I will just say this: the two things are very different, and for this reason, the Constitution would have abolished all the preceding treaties. It would have abolished Rome, Nice, Amsterdam, Maastricht, the Single European Act. Therefore, a vote on the Constitution would have been a de facto vote, or in or out. Therefore, the in or out referendum is actually the one on the substantive issue, which we will support, and we will continue to campaign for, and hope it will find favour in this House. I welcome, therefore, the Citizens' Initiative idea, which I think may indeed need to be developed or changed. Time will tell, in fact, how much it is used, but the principle in trying to connect better to the electorate is indeed a good one. On the issue of national parliaments, extending the time for them to consider legislation is obviously a good idea. There are many practical difficulties with different parliamentary timetables, recess dates and so on that make 6 weeks inadequate. Is 8 weeks enough? Well, we'll have to see, but it's certainly a step in the right direction and could possibly be the subject of further review. We've also heard about the yellow card idea, which is an important innovation for the protection of subsidiarity, and indeed one also that apparently the front bench of the Conservatives felt minded to agree with. Last Wednesday, during the foreign policy debate, we discussed in more detail the role of the High Representative. And without going over all of that ground again, let me just say that it's sensible to have one set of offices rather than two, working on the EU's external relations with one individual responsible. It removes confusion and strengthens the voice of the EU where there is unanimity, and therefore amplifies the view of the UK on such issues. A legal personality for the EU is not the huge move that the Tory benches would have us believe. Many organisations have legal personality, from the UN to the Universal Postal Union, and indeed the European Community that preceded the European Union also had that status. Despite the scaremongering that we have seen on the passerelle clause, there is a secure triple lock, which will also, importantly, enable the reduction of EU powers. And in any case, before any change is made to voting arrangements, the European Parliament, the European Council and national parliaments must all agree. So this House will retain the final say. Absolutely. Finally, new Article 49A in the Maastricht Treaty, or the TEU, explicitly sets out how a member state would go about withdrawal from the EU. Now, for most of our constituents, this article gets to the nub of the debate that they are having about Europe, to the extent that there is a debate that they are engaged in at all. What is Britain's future? Is it as a strong voice in the EU with more global influence? Or is it outside, weak and isolated? That's a debate that would be a welcome one to have in the country, and as you know, Mr Deputy Speaker, a debate I am disappointed that we will not be voting on today. I know there are many members on the Conservative benches who subscribe to the Better Off Out campaign, and much as I disagree with them, they are of course entitled to their views. I only find it a little strange that there are also by and large opposing moves in the treaty that set an explicit framework for countries to be able to leave the EU should they wish to do so. It does seem to be a little bit of a strange position. Mr Deputy Speaker, these changes will help the EU to work better, although it will still obviously be far from perfect. It is a step in the right direction, and therefore we will not be supporting the amendment that has been selected. It's just a shame we will not have the opportunity to vote on the amendment in the name of my right honourable friend for Sheffield Hallam.
Gisela Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.